basics of calling, how best to get the most duck-like sounds from your MPK custom call. First up, how to hold the call. If you place the call between your thumb and forefinger in the web of skin that is formed at the base of those two digits, and just allow your hand to drape slightly across the end of the call so that it forms a little bit of back pressure when you blow through the call itself. This gives you an opportunity to employ your first two fingers to add extra emphasis to certain of the notes, as you'll see as this lesson progresses. How to put the call to your mouth, very much like drinking from a soft drink bottle. Put it up to your mouth so that if you were drinking from a soft drink bottle, you would not be having liquid dribble out the side of your mouth. Most importantly of all, absolutely critical to the correct employment of a duck call is air delivery, how to blow into the call correctly. Can't emphasise this enough. The air needs to come up from your diaphragm. By that I mean that you should be producing hot air, and if you were to imagine that you were trying to fog a mirror or a pane of glass by going as opposed to blowing out a candle where you would be using air produced from higher up in your lungs and expelled from your mouth using your cheeks, again blowing out a candle thus. It's the first of those two that you need to be employing. Next up, in terms of importance from the air production, is how you actually introduce the air into the mouthpiece of the call itself. And for this, it's important that you get the tongue position absolutely correct. Now, the tip of your tongue should be placed at the back or the bottom of the back of your front teeth, like that. One of the reasons for that is that if your tongue is moving around inside the mouth cavity, you never have any consistency of shape and therefore volume, which means that every time you blow, if your tongue is not correctly anchored, you're producing air through a shape that is changing on each occasion, and it becomes very difficult to be consistent. By placing your tongue in the way that I've just described, you've always got a consistently sized hole in your mouth through which you can push the air so that you get consistency in the notes when you produce them. Now, with your tongue firmly placed at the bottom of the back of your front teeth, if you then push the air across your tongue using, and I can best describe it by simply showing you, by using a method like this, by going and if I introduce that into the call, you can hear that the velocity achieved by the air is adequate to get the call reeds vibrating instantly at the speed that they need to move at to produce a duck-like sound. Now, we've touched on that briefly, so let's move on now to the production of the quack itself. And the quack is one of the main building blocks of all of the quacking call sequences, and for that we're going to use the reference word quit, Q-U-I-T. Now, there's a reason for using the word quit, and it is this, that the K or the K sound, if you think about this, if you practice it for a moment before you try putting air into the call, in order to start the beginning of the K sound, you have to put the back of your tongue against the top of the back of your throat in a sort of a K movement. It's something that you do quite instinctively. You don't have to think about it, but what it does is it creates an air dam, so that when you release the air from behind that, it comes out in a short, sharp burst, which immediately accelerates the call's read to the speed that it needs to achieve to get that clean. If you do it any slower, you get a sound that frankly doesn't sound like that at all. The amount of air pressure that you would introduce into the call throughout the duration of that quack should diminish slightly from the start to the end and should finish with the letter T. And the reason for that is that by employing the T sound, you again chop off the sound at the end of the note rapidly, and if you put the three components together, the Q, the descending breath of air through the middle and the T at the end, you will get, and you can see there that I'm just using my hand to give the Q and the T that extra little piece of emphasis. And now for a couple of Nick's top tips of the day. One that other wildfowlers will probably appreciate most is this: don't practice your duck calling on the foreshore. There's nothing worse than a poor caller constantly blowing a call on the foreshore, especially when there are no birds about. And having said that, you need to develop an understanding of the best time to use the call. I would suggest to you that for morning and evening flight, when, as often happens, you get mallard passing overhead 3 gunshots high, patently on their way somewhere else, my advice would be leave those birds alone. They know where they're going and they will simply not respond to your call, and all you'll do is end up annoying other wildfowlers on the shore. The call works best for birds that are lower, less focused on where they're going, disorientated perhaps by the weather, moved by the tide, or of course the classic is with the use of decoys. And under those latter circumstances, you'll find that your MPK custom call can be absolutely devastating. One of the things that we talked about earlier was the production of air, and I mentioned the fact that the air needs to come from your diaphragm. And I'm sure there will be some of you standing there scratching your heads thinking, well, how do I produce air from my diaphragm? How do I find where my diaphragm is if that's something that I'm not used to doing? Well, here's a simple solution for you. If you simply do this, cough. And if you do that half a dozen times, you will rediscover the group of muscles that power your diaphragm. And it's that you need to concentrate on to produce the air correctly in the way that we described earlier on in this clip. I hope that helps. Good calling.